David Ruffin, as a child, would be subjected to physical and emotional abuse from his strict father, Eli Ruffin, a Baptist minister. David Ruffin had a multiple-decade-long history of alcohol and drug abuse, particularly of the illegal stimulant drug cocaine and later crack cocaine. His addictions began in the 1960s and continued until his death. His addictions primarily contributed to the manifestation of erratic, aggressive, egotistical, and other negative behaviors during his initial tenure with the Temptations. He had his first stint in rehabilitation in 1967. Ruffin was kicked out of the Temptations in the summer of 1968 after multiple instances of missing and showing up late to on-stage performances, rehearsals, and other appearances. Ruffin's attempts to take leadership over the Temptations also led to his removal and eventual replacement by fellow singer Dennis Edwards. As Ruffin continued to abuse substances throughout his career, incidents of domestic violence became more frequent and significant. His romantic relationship with fellow Motown artist Tammy Terrell reportedly ended after Ruffin had struck her with his motorcycle helmet. Former long-term girlfriend Jenna Sapia had stated that Ruffin had once struck her and broke her eardrum. Ruffin reportedly would also physically punish his son, David Jr., to excess. Ruffin reportedly had frequently made company with drug dealers, prostitutes, and pimps during his career. After being let go by the Temptations, Ruffin had sporadic success in his solo career with hit songs such as his 1969 debut single, My Whole World Ended the Moment You Left Me, and his 1975 single, Walk Away from Love. In April 1982, Ruffin was indicted by a federal grand jury for charges of income tax evasion during the late 1970s. He was sentenced by a U.S. District Court to a sentence of 6 months and 1 day in jail. Ruffin was also required to pay a fine of $5,000. During 1982 as well, David Ruffin rejoined his Temptation bandmates for a reunion, and they embarked on a subsequent tour of the United States. Ruffin had alleged to Temptations member and founder Otis Williams and others that his negative behaviors during his time with the Temptations in the 1960s would not re-emerge. During the tour, however, Ruffin started missing performances again due to his addictions and was soon withdrawn completely from being promoted and displayed for their performances. Towards the end of his life, Ruffin had reconnected with former Temptations members Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards, and they began performing together, billing themselves as the original lead singers of the Temptations. Ruffin continued to confront legal issues into the late 1980s. In 1986, Ruffin was arrested for obtaining and concealing a stolen handgun. In 1987, Ruffin spent a brief period in jail for multiple parole violations. This was initiated by a drug raid in Detroit, where he was found to be possessing cocaine and other drug paraphernalia. In May 1988, a missing persons report was filed for Ruffin in order to track him down for a court appearance related to a charge of cocaine possession. Ruffin was found guilty of a misdemeanor charge and was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 50 days of community service. In September 1989, Ruffin was ordered by a judge to attend a rehabilitation program in Detroit instead of receiving a prison sentence for violating the stipulations of his probation on 3 instances. Ruffin, who was reportedly initially reluctant to attend the rehabilitation, received rehabilitation treatment for about a month, leaving rehab in October 1989. After leaving rehab, David Ruffin claimed that he was sober in spite of rumors of continued addiction. He soon resumed performing with Kendricks and Edwards. Also, in 1989, Ruffin began living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with girlfriend Diane Showers. Showers had stated that she first met Ruffin as a 14-year-old fan. After his death, she stated that Ruffin always told her he never expected to live a long life. She also stated that Ruffin always sought out the roughest neighborhoods in cities he visited. She had encouraged Ruffin to move back to his native Mississippi to escape his lifestyle. Showers reportedly last saw Ruffin on May 29, 1991. Ruffin's last tour with Edwards and Kendricks was held in England in the spring of 1991. Ruffin requested all of his portion of royalties from the tour in cash, a total of $40,000 of the amalgamated $300,000 total dollars made from the tour. According to Dennis Edwards, Ruffin had made the decision to return to Philadelphia despite the tour being successful and promoters wanting the trio to begin another tour. According to a statement from Nedra Ruffin, one of David Ruffin's 3 daughters, taken during a 2019 interview, she was one of the last individuals to hold a conversation with her father, to which he alleged that he was sober and had optimistically announced his plans for the future. Ruffin kept his money and other items from his time in England in a briefcase and a money belt that he wore on his clothes. His briefcase was reported to contain personal files and an undisclosed amount of traveler's checks. At between 10 and 11 p.m. on May 31, 1991, Ruffin loaned a limo from a friend named Linster Butch Murrell, who operated a limousine service in Philadelphia. Ruffin was reported to have borrowed limousines from Murrell on past occasions. In the company of Ruffin that night was 35-year-old Donald Brown, another friend of Ruffin. Sometime that night, Ruffin had purchased crack cocaine and took it to a reported drug house located on 52nd Street near Columbia Avenue in West Philadelphia. There, Ruffin reportedly split 10 vials of crack cocaine in under half of an hour, an enormous amount of the drug, with another man by the name of William Noel. Ruffin then collapsed in the drug house and was transported to the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania by Brown in the borrowed gray limousine. The limousine arrived at the hospital at around 2:55 a.m. with an unconscious Ruffin as a passenger. Ruffin was described to be wearing bright, multicolored Bermuda shorts, white sneakers and a lime green sports shirt. Ruffin reportedly had no forms of identification on his body and was carrying just $53 on his body. Brown promptly departed the hospital and returned the limousine to Murrell after dropping off Ruffin that morning. After spending about an hour in the hospital's emergency room receiving resuscitation efforts from the medical staff, David Ruffin was declared dead at 3:55 a.m. on June 1, 1991. Ruffin was 50 years old. Due to apparently possessing no identification, Ruffin was routinely labeled by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner Office as a John Doe. He was later positively identified by running his fingerprints through an FBI fingerprint database. The medical examiner subsequently determined that Ruffin had died from an accidental adverse reaction to drugs, particularly crack cocaine. According to Edwards, Murrell had contacted him by phone at around 4 a.m. on the morning of June 1 to inform him of Ruffin's overdose and was taken to the hospital. Ruffin's money belt and large sum of money that Ruffin had accumulated from his recent tour was discovered to be missing, and Philadelphia police authorities began investigating the circumstances of the case. Ruffin's briefcase was later recovered, but the traveler's checks were not contained within it. Donald Brown was reportedly later located and questioned on 2 occasions by police after Ruffin's death and was not charged with any wrongdoings. Long-term suspicion of foul play quickly emerged after his death, particularly among Ruffin's loved ones. When Showers was informed of Ruffin's death, she expressed a lack of surprise, stating, "When David had a lot of money, he would be able to do things that he wanted to do." Showers also expressed suspicion and concerns around Ruffin's death and missing money, stating, "But there was something about his death from a suspected drug overdose over the weekend that didn't add up. $40,000 is missing." After his sudden death, many radio stations played music from Ruffin's discography in tribute of the singer. David Ruffin's body was transported to Detroit, and an open casket funeral for him was held on June 10, 1991, at New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit. The 2.5-hour service was attended by a total of 2,500 people, with many mourners packed outside the church. Fellow musicians Aretha Franklin, Orthea Barnes, and Stevie Wonder gave musical performances at Ruffin's service. Ruffin's former Temptations bandmates Melvin Franklin, Eddie Kendricks, Dennis Edwards, and Otis Williams took turns to speak about Ruffin, coming together to sing their #1 hit, "My Girl," in Ruffin's honor. Ruffin had originally sang lead on this hit song. In addition, Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, spoke at Ruffin's funeral. A number of flowers were left by other notable figures in the music industry, including Daryl Hall and John Oates, Rod Stewart, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, and the Spinners. A note by Stewart and his wife that was attached to Rod Stewart's floral arrangement stated, "You were a great influence on me. Rest peacefully." The note left by Hall and Oates on their flower arrangement stated, "He was an inspiration to us all, and we will miss him very much." Michael Jackson had paid for the expenses for the funeral on behalf of the Ruffin family. After the service, Ruffin's body was interred into Section 3, Lot 243 of Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit. Ruffin's epitaph states, "Beloved father and grandfather. One of the world's greatest entertainers, his lyrics and singing, touched the hearts of many. Memories cherished by Cheryl, Nedra, Kimberly, David Jr., and grandchildren. We love you in God's care. A defamation lawsuit was filed in 2001 by Ruffin's family and estate against NBC and other production companies involved with the creation of the 4-hour Temptations biographical miniseries based on Otis Williams's memoir. Defamation was accused by Ruffin's family due to the series' depiction of Ruffin's death circumstances, with a beaten unconscious Ruffin being thrown out of a speeding limousine in front of a hospital where he died and was stated to be unclaimed in the morgue for a week. This was in conflict with the plaintiff's knowledge that Brown had actually escorted Ruffin into the emergency room and informed the hospital of his presence and that Ruffin's body was claimed by one of his children a few days after his death. Ruffin's estate ultimately lost the lawsuit,